As night falls, there are very small moments when every sound seems to fade away, and all that remains is the steady rhythm of breathing in a quiet space. Time moves a little more slowly, as if the world itself is resting. Welcome to Sleep Science Galaxy. Here we do not rush to find answers. We simply listen, slowly, as if walking on a long journey without needing to know the destination just yet. Tonight, we will gently reflect on something very strange in the universe. An invisible force that scientists call dark energy. Something we cannot see or touch, yet it is quietly influencing the expansion of the entire universe. Much like many things in life that still exist even when we do not notice them. Think of this video as a small pause, a space where science is told slowly and where you can simply listen until sleep arrives, soft and gentle. The scale of the universe. Let your mind slow its drifting a little, as if each thought is settling, layer by layer, like the surface of a lake after the wind has faded. In that quietness, we can begin to imagine the vast space above us, not as something distant or unfamiliar, but as a familiar sky that has always been there, even when we do not look up. At night, when the lights grow dim and the sounds of the day recede, sometimes we see a few stars. They appear small, silent, and almost motionless. Yet that stillness is only a human impression. In truth, the light from those tiny points began its journey long ago. So long ago that it is difficult to imagine. Some rays of light left their stars before humans learned to write. Before the first cities were built, even before many mountain ranges on Earth had taken the shapes we know today. Light, as we know, travels very fast. So fast that in a single second, it could circle the Earth many times. But the universe is not measured in seconds, or in hours, or in the familiar distances of human life. In that immensity, distance is measured in light years. The distance light travels in an entire year. And when we consider that a number slowly, without needing to fully grasp it, we begin to sense that the universe is not only large, but large in a way that is very quiet, very deep, and very patient. Try to imagine, not clearly, only faintly, that there are regions of space where light must travel millions of years to arrive, and farther still, billions of years. This means that when we look into the night sky, we are not truly seeing the present. We are looking into the past, layer upon layer of past, like circles spreading across the surface of water. In that vastness, stars do not stand alone. They gather into immense rivers of light that we call galaxies. Each galaxy is an island of light, drifting silently in a dark ocean. There are small galaxies, large galaxies, and galaxies whose light requires hundreds of thousands of years to travel from one side to the other. And then, as astronomers quietly observed the sky through telescopes that grew larger and more sensitive, they realized that those galaxies were not all that existed. They were not merely a few hundred or a few thousand. There were so many that numbers themselves began to soften in the mind, no longer sharp as when we count small objects in our hands. It is estimated that within the observable universe, there are hundreds of billions of galaxies. A number so vast that perhaps the best way to feel it is not to try to picture it precisely, but simply to let it exist as a sense of immensity. Each galaxy, in turn, contains billions, even hundreds of billions of stars. And around many of those stars, there may be planets turning quietly in the darkness, much like our Earth circles the sun without making any sound in the emptiness of space. When we reflect on this slowly, we begin to realize that the place where we are lying, the place where we are breathing, is only a very small point within a network so vast that it has no clear boundary. Yet this need not make us feel lost. On the contrary, sometimes it brings a very gentle feeling, as if the small worries of the day are being placed into a wider space, where they can dissolve without needing to be resolved at once. Light continues its journey, unhurried, without slowing, simply moving. Some of the light touching our eyes tonight began its journey when the earth was still very young. And there are other rays from places even farther away that are still on their way, that have never reached here and perhaps never will. The universe we can observe has a limit, not because it ends there, but because light from more distant regions has not yet had enough time to arrive. It is like standing on a shore in the mist. We know the ocean extends far beyond, but our eyes can see only a small distance ahead. The rest is still there, quiet, in no hurry to be seen. As this thought drifts by, we may imagine the universe as a vast space opening in every direction, slowly, almost imperceptibly. Galaxies do not stand still. They are moving, very slowly, very far away, like points of light drifting upon a current whose motion we cannot feel when we stand nearby. Time in that space carries a different rhythm as well. Light requires time to travel, and this is what makes the universe a story told in very long silences. What we see is not a single moment, but a journey. And perhaps, as these images pass gently through the mind, we begin to sense something very simple. Everything in the universe unfolds with infinite patience. Nothing is in a hurry. Stars are born, shine, and quietly fade across spans of time longer than the entire history of humanity. Galaxies turn so slowly that if we could perceive their motion, millions of years might already have passed. Within that vastness, simply lying still, simply listening, simply letting the breath move in and out, seems to become a natural part of the greater rhythm. There is no need to understand everything, no need to picture it clearly. It is enough to know that out there, space is still expanding, light is still traveling, and galaxies are still drifting in profound silence. And in this moment, as you are listening, you are here as well, on a small planet, turning slowly in the gentle darkness, surrounded by a universe that is vast, yet never hurried. Everything is still unfolding, softly and steadily, like a current that flows for a very long time without needing an ending. You do not need to keep pace with that current. You only need to drift with it slowly, and let the stillness of that vast space become a quiet refuge where the mind can rest and where sleep can arrive naturally, like light passing silently through endless distances. Discovery of dark energy. And while we are still drifting within that sense of vastness, while the images of distant galaxies and ancient rays of light continue to pass quietly through the mind like the faintest ripples, we may begin to notice that human beings, though small, have always looked up at the sky with a very particular patience. Not always to search for something new, but sometimes simply to listen, to observe, to record changes so slow that they are almost impossible to perceive. There were nights, not so long ago when compared with the age of the universe, when telescopes were turned toward the sky with a very simple purpose. The observers of that time were not seeking anything dramatic. They only wished to measure, to understand more clearly something already known, that the universe is expanding, that galaxies are quietly moving away from one another, like small dots on the surface of a balloon being inflated very slowly. That idea had existed long enough to feel familiar, almost self-evident, like a calm underlying rhythm that everyone accepted. And then, in the final years of the 20th century, several observing teams began to look at particular points of light in the night sky. Stars that had reached the final stages of their lives. Stellar explosions whose light could flare brightly for a short time, then quietly fade. Those points of light, from very far away, appeared like candles lit in the depth of space. Their light had a very useful property. Their initial brightness was nearly the same, like lamps made from a single mold. And so, when that light reached the Earth, people could quietly compare it, could estimate distance, could understand how far away those explosions had been. Night followed night of observation, unhurried, without noise. Light was recorded, numbers were written down, and time passed in the familiar patience of watching the sky. Nothing remarkable happened at once. Only points of light, small curves traced on paper, silent calculations, like steady footsteps along a long road. And then, very gradually, a strange feeling began to appear. Not a shock, not a sudden awakening, but more like walking in mist and realizing that the landscape around you is not exactly as you once believed. The explosions very far away seemed slightly dimmer than expected. Not by much, only a little, just enough to make the observers linger longer over their numbers. At first, it might have been only an error, a small deviation, the kind that often occurs in delicate measurements. But as observations continued, as more distant lights were recorded, that small deviation remained, repeating itself patiently, like a whisper that would not disappear. If the light was dimmer, it meant those explosions were farther away than predicted. And if they were farther away, it suggested that the universe, during the time that light had been traveling, had expanded more than people had once thought. In other words, the expansion was not only continuing, it was unfolding in a very quiet way, faster and faster. That realization did not arrive like thunder. It came like a gentle wave passing through the minds of those who were watching the sky. For many decades before, it had been imagined that the gravity of all matter in the universe would gradually slow the expansion, like a ball thrown upward that slows before it falls. But those distant points of light seemed to be telling a different story. A story in which space was not only opening, but opening with a rhythm that was slowly increasing, very slowly, very steadily, yet enough to be recognized when looking across the immense distances of the cosmos. Perhaps that moment was not loud at all. There is no sound in deep space, and even on Earth. That realization unfolded in quiet rooms, where lamplight fell across pages and screens, where people sat for long hours, simply to be certain that what they were seeing was real. And then, gradually, as more observations from many places began to come together, the picture became clearer, not in a sharp way, but in the way an image slowly appears through mist. The universe, it seemed, was being stretched by something very gentle, very uniform, present everywhere, yet impossible to see directly. This did not change the sky before our eyes. The stars still shimmered as they always had. The nights remained as quiet as ever. But at a deeper level, across distances where light must travel billions of years, the rhythm of space itself had changed slightly, like a piece of music in which the beat becomes quicker, but so slowly that only those who listen for a long time can notice. When we think about this in stillness, we may sense something very gentle. The universe is neither a motionless place nor a chaotic one. It is like a current that is vast and deep, in which every movement unfolds slowly, patiently, far beyond all the familiar measures of human life. The stellar explosions faded long ago, yet their light continues to travel, carrying their story across cold and silent distances. And billions of years later, that light touches small mirrors and lenses on a small planet, where there are beings who can look upward and wonder. Perhaps the most beautiful part of this story is not found in the numbers, but in the patience on both sides. The patience of the light as it travels, and the patience of human beings as they wait. And while all of this unfolds, the earth continues to turn very slowly, very steadily. Night still arrives, and tired minds still seek quiet spaces in which to rest. If we allow that thought to pass without trying to hold it, it may become a very gentle feeling. That out there, at distances beyond imagining, space is still expanding, galaxies are still drifting apart, and something very gentle, very silent, is guiding that rhythm. There is no need to name it yet, no need to understand everything. It is enough to know that the universe is still moving in its own way. And in this moment, you are here as well. Quiet, safe, surrounded by a space wide enough for every thought to slow and dissolve. Like light gradually fading far away. What dark energy might be. And while that thought is still drifting very slowly in the mind, like a mist that has not yet faded, people began to wonder, not with urgency, but with a familiar patience. What is quietly guiding that rhythm of expansion? What could be so gentle that no one can see it, yet still sufficient to touch the whole of space? Questions like these rarely arrive in a single clear moment. They appear the way a small thought passes quietly through the mind in the night, not needing an immediate answer, only needing to be there, suspended, long enough for us to grow accustomed to its presence. Some began to imagine that perhaps the emptiness we call space is not completely empty. When we look at the night sky, the dark regions between the stars seem only to be the absence of light. Yet, at a deeper level, that darkness may still carry a very subtle presence, difficult to perceive, like the air in a quiet room. We do not see it, yet it is there, surrounding, supporting, allowing each breath to happen naturally. If space itself carries a very small, very uniform energy, spread everywhere, then over time, as the universe becomes wider, that quiet presence would also become significant. Not because it is powerful, but because it is everywhere, with no beginning and no end, like the stillness of a long night, reaching every place without exception. This idea does not need to be imagined too clearly. It is enough to sense that emptiness may not be entirely empty, that within the very openness, there may be something gentle that exists, sufficient to allow space to continue expanding very slowly, very steadily. Then there were others who, listening to the story of the universe in their own way, imagined things with a different rhythm. They considered the possibility that this expansion might not change with time, that there could be something that always remains at the same level, neither growing stronger nor fading, like a steady underlying rhythm in a long piece of music. That underlying rhythm does not need to stand out. It only needs to exist, quietly, steadily, so that the whole composition can continue to flow. And if space itself holds such a constant presence, then over time, as the distances between galaxies grow larger, that quiet rhythm would become easier to notice, like a very faint sound that can be heard only when all other sounds have settled. These ideas do not compete with one another, nor do they deny one another. They are like different paths passing through the same quiet forest. Each path opens a different view, a different way of sensing, and all of them are walked with patience. And then there are even gentler imaginings, as if the very thing causing the universe to expand is not entirely still. Not an unchanging presence, but something like a very light wind, sometimes a little stronger, sometimes a little softer, yet always so slow that it cannot be noticed within the brief spans of human time. This image is like the surface of the sea on a moonless night. From afar, the water appears flat and still, yet if one looks for a long time, very small ripples can be seen, moving slowly, almost without clear shape. Space, in this way of imagining, may also hold a movement just as subtle. Not enough to be seen directly, but enough, across billions of years, to shape very great changes. What is remarkable is that all these imaginings do not change the night sky before our eyes. The stars remain where they are, the light as gentle as ever. There is no sign in ordinary life that space holds mysteries so deep. And perhaps that is what makes this story so quiet. The universe does not hurry to explain itself. It simply continues to expand, to drift, to let light pass through cold and deep distances, as if time is not a rushing current, but a vast ocean in which every movement unfolds in its own rhythm. When we think about this in stillness, we may feel a small sense of ease. There is no need to understand everything. There is no need to choose a single answer. It is enough to know that human beings have listened long enough to realize that the universe is not only vast, but also subtle, and that within emptiness itself, something gentle may be hidden. Hypotheses, thoughts, different ways of imagining. All of them are like small lamps being lit in a wide room. No single lamp illuminates the entire space, yet each one softens the darkness, makes it gentler, less cold. And while these thoughts continue to be quietly nurtured, the night sky remains there, silent, unchanged. The earth continues to turn, very slowly, carrying sleep and dreams, carrying minds that are gradually becoming still. Perhaps the most important thing is not to know exactly what is causing the universe to expand, but to feel that human beings are still observing, still wondering, and still doing so with great patience. And as these thoughts drift away, without needing to be held, without needing to be remembered, we can return to the rhythm of the breath, to the simple feeling of lying still, surrounded by the gentle darkness of night. Out there, space is still expanding, galaxies are still drifting farther apart, and perhaps, within that emptiness that seems so quiet, something very gentle, very deep, is still present, silent, needing no visibility in order to exist. And that thought, if we allow it to settle very slowly, may become a quiet refuge, a place where the mind does not need to travel any farther, where every question may rest for a while, like small waves gradually smoothing across the surface of the night sea. Strange properties of a dark energy. And while those thoughts about space not being completely empty continue to drift quietly through the mind, like thin clouds moving across a silent night sky, we may begin to sense something rather strange. That there are things in the universe which never appear before our eyes, yet still remain present, enduring, and deeper than our familiar human perceptions. There are things in life that are like this as well. We do not see the air, yet we still breathe. We do not see time, yet we feel morning pass into evening, and evening gently give way to night. And perhaps, in the vast universe, there exist things of the same kind, without shape, without light, leaving no direct trace for the eyes, yet still there, very real, very steady, like an invisible foundation supporting every motion. When observers look into the sky, they do not see this as they see a star or a band of light. There is no image of it in photographs of the heavens, no bright point to indicate and say, "Here, it is here." The thing that causes space to expand does not appear as an object, but is sensed only through very slow, very subtle changes in the distances between faraway galaxies. This makes it a very unusual kind of presence, not something that can be touched, nor something that can be seen, but more like an unseen, underlying rhythm in a long piece of music. We do not hear that rhythm by itself, yet if it were to disappear, the entire composition would no longer be the same. Thinking of this very slowly, we may imagine that something is quietly present everywhere. Not in some distant corner of the universe, not only between galaxies, but in every region of space, even in the darkest areas that seem most empty. Space, in this way, is not only an empty stage upon which stars and galaxies appear. It is more like a very deep ocean, within which there are currents so gentle that they cannot be seen, yet still sufficient to carry everything along with their rhythm. And perhaps what surprises people most, as this thought gradually becomes familiar, is the sense that this invisible thing is not a small part of the universe. It is not a rare detail or an uncommon phenomenon. On the contrary, it appears to make up most of what exists, as if the dark of the night sky is not merely the background for the stars, but the largest part of the whole scene. When we look up at the sky, we usually notice the points of light, but between those points lie stretches of darkness, deep and quiet. And it is those dark regions that dominate, that form the greater part, that surround everything we see. This thought, when felt slowly, does not make the universe seem colder. On the contrary, it brings a rather unusual feeling, that what we see is only a thin layer on the surface of a reality far deeper, wider, and quieter. It may be like standing at the shore of the sea at night. We see small ripples reflecting the moonlight, but beneath them lies a vast, silent ocean, which does not need to reveal itself in order to exist. The thing that quietly causes space to expand is like that ocean. It does not need to be seen. It only needs to be present, evenly, everywhere, like a very slow breath of the universe itself. And if we attend to that thought for long enough, we may sense that this everywhere present presence carries within it a kind of gentleness. It does not pull or force. It does not make galaxies move in haste. Everything continues according to a rhythm that is very slow, very deep, as if the universe always has enough time for every one of its changes. Galaxies drift apart not in chaos, but in a motion that is very steady, very patient, like leaves floating on a quiet stream. And that stream, though unseen, remains there, supporting, guiding silently and persistently. As this thought passes through the mind, we may realize something very gentle. Not everything important needs to be seen. There are things that can only be understood through the faintest traces they leave, through very small changes, through very long spans of time. The universe, in this way, is like a story told more through silences than through words. What we see are only small marks upon the page, while most of the story lies in the spaces between the lines. And in this moment, As we lie still and listen, we too are in such a space. A quiet space where nothing needs to be done, nothing more needs to be understood, only to be present, just as space itself is present everywhere without needing attention. Out there, across distances that light requires billions of years to cross, the expansion continues, very slow, very steady. And that invisible presence remains there, without shape, without color, without sound, yet still touching the whole universe, like a gentle wind that never ceases to blow. And perhaps, when we allow that thought to settle very deeply, we may feel a small sense of peace. That the universe is not only what we see, but also everything we do not see. All the quiet spaces, all the things that exist without needing to be named. Like the gentle darkness of a room when we close our eyes. Not an absence, but a space wide enough for the mind to rest, quiet enough for sleep to arrive. Very slowly, very softly, like the breath that is passing in this very moment. Dark energy and the fate of the universe. And while the thought of that quiet presence still lingers, light as a breath not yet faded, the mind may begin to drift a little farther. Not in distance, but in time. The universe is not only vast in space, but also deep in time. What is unfolding now? The slow expansion, the galaxies quietly drifting apart, are all very small moments within a story so long that the human imagination can touch it only through images that are soft, indistinct, and gentle. If space continues to open in that rhythm, if galaxies continue to move away from one another, then the sky of a very distant future may be different, not in a sudden way, but in the way one notices only after a very long time has passed. Distant galaxies would gradually grow dimmer, their light traveling across ever-widening stretches of space, and that journey would become longer, more silent. There may come a time in far-off eras when the sky seen from some distant planet will be darker than the sky we know today. Not because the stars have suddenly vanished, but because the distances have grown too great, and light can no longer cross the expanding oceans of space. This thought does not need to bring sadness or worry. It is like evening slowly becoming late night. The light does not disappear in a single moment. It simply softens, gradually, until we realize that the world around us has grown quieter, darker, and also more peaceful. Over spans of time so long, the universe may also become colder. Not the cold of a sudden wind, but a cold that arrives very slowly, very deeply, like a cup of hot tea left on a table, where minute by minute, hour by hour, the warmth quietly leaves. No one notices the exact moment when it is gone. Stars, which shine through their own fuel, do not last forever. They glow across spans of time beyond all familiar measures, and then they too grow quiet, leaving wider spaces of darkness between points of light. And as the universe continues to expand, those dark spaces widen as well, like a lake whose waters recede very slowly, revealing ever larger stretches of stillness. One way of imagining that future is of a universe that becomes very quiet, very sparse, and very cold. There is no single moment of ending, no boundary between being and not being, only a gradual transformation in which everything slowly becomes more silent. Like a room where every sound has faded until only the faint rhythm of breathing remains. But there are also other imaginings, gentler ones, like different ripples upon the same surface of water. If the expansion continues to change with time, if its rhythm gradually becomes faster, then in very distant ages, the distances between all things might grow so quickly that even the familiar structures of the universe would slowly come apart. Seen through the eyes of stillness, this thought does not need to carry fear. It is like the image of a thin mist slowly dissolving in the air of early morning. There's no sound, no sudden moment, only a gradual thinning, a soft fading, until everything becomes clearer and more open than before. Planets, stars, galaxies, all are held together by the invisible threads of gravity, threads that are strong and patient. But if the space between them continues to widen, those threads, in a very distant future, may slowly loosen, like a boat drifting on water, while the rope tying it to the shore grows longer with the rising tide. All these possibilities, however they are imagined, unfold across spans of time so long that every change becomes gentle. Nothing happens in a single night. Nothing arrives in an instant. The universe always moves in its own rhythm, a rhythm so slow that the slowness itself becomes a kind of peace. And when we think about spans of time like these, we may notice something very light. All the small worries of human life take place within a very short span, like small ripples upon a vast sea. Those ripples may feel strong in the moment, but they too fade, leaving the surface calm once more. Out there, the universe continues to expand, continues to cool, continues to pass through ages without haste. And within that very long current, stillness is not something to fear, but a natural state, like night arriving after day, like sleep arriving after the body has grown tired. Perhaps the simplest way to feel this is to return to this moment, to the slow rhythm of the breath, to the feeling of the body being supported, to the quietness of the room around you. In this moment, you too are drifting in time, like every star, every galaxy, every small grain of dust in the universe. There is no need to travel to endless ages to find peace. Peace is already here, in the breath, in the silence between two thoughts, in the very gentle stillness of the night. And while we allow the mind to slow, the universe continues its long story with no clear beginning and no need for a hurried ending. Only a current that is very deep, very long, and very quiet, like sleep gradually arriving, not rushed, not sudden, but simply closing the eyes of weary minds and letting everything dissolve into the gentle stillness of endless space. Everyday analogies. And as the thought of those endless spans of time gradually settles, like the surface of water after the final ripple has faded, the mind may return to more familiar images. Images that are close, gentle, and do not require us to imagine something far away in order to feel them. Because sometimes the greatest things can be understood through things that are very small, very near, things we have seen in life without ever thinking that they might carry within them a story of the entire universe. Try to imagine, not clearly, only faintly, a quiet kitchen in the late afternoon. On the table is a piece of soft dough, not yet shaped, resting in a bowl. At first, it seems unchanged. But if you look away for a while and then return, you may notice that the dough has risen a little, very gently, very slowly, so slowly that the moment it began to grow could never be seen. There is no sound when this happens, no obvious motion, only a very gradual, very even expansion, as if within the dough there were a slow breathing that the eye cannot perceive. If there were small grains scattered within that dough as it rises, the grains would slowly move farther apart, not because they move on their own, but because the space between them is growing. The distance increases naturally, gently, without any strong force, without any sudden motion. This thought, when held slowly in the mind, can bring a very comfortable feeling. The universe, in a simple way of imagining, may be like this. Not galaxies rushing through empty space, but the space between them expanding, like dough rising in the quiet of a room. There's no need to imagine it in detail. Simply sensing that slowness, that patience, is enough. And then, if the mind still wishes to drift a little farther, we may imagine something else, just as familiar. A balloon, still soft, being inflated very slowly. On its surface are small dots drawn with a pen. As the balloon begins to swell, the dots do not crawl away or separate by themselves. They simply become farther apart because the surface beneath them is growing. If one were standing on one of those dots, looking around, the other dots would seem to be gradually moving away. In every direction, it would be the same, with no clear center, no single point from which everything begins to depart. Only a uniform expansion, very slow, very gentle, happening everywhere at once. This thought, as it passes through the mind, can make the universe feel a little closer. It is no longer an unimaginable distant place, but a movement that feels familiar, like something we have seen, touched, or sensed through the simplest experiences. Perhaps the most beautiful part of these images is not that they explain anything, but that they allow the mind to rest. There is no need for numbers, no need for immense distances, only a gentle sense that everything is expanding, slowly, steadily, like a breath moving in and out. And when we think about this, we may realize that the expansion of the universe is not a loud event. It is not like a storm, not like a great wave. It is like the growth of a tree during the night, continuous yet unheard, unseen in each moment, noticed only after time has passed. Out there, galaxies are still drifting farther apart, little by little, like small dots on a balloon slowly swelling. There is no haste in that motion, no destination that must be reached, only a rhythm that is very long, very deep, a rhythm the universe has carried for billions of years. And in this moment, as we lie still and listen, that rhythm seems to slow within the mind as well. The breath becomes steadier, thoughts become more spaced, like stars in a wide sky. Perhaps this is what makes these simple images so comforting. They do not demand understanding. They do not require memory. They are only gentle pictures, enough for the mind to drift with, like a leaf floating on calm water. And as that leaf drifts a little farther, we may sense that everything in the universe, from the largest galaxies to the smallest grains of dust, is within that same slow current. Nothing needs to hurry. Nothing needs to change at once. The expansion continues, like dough still rising in gentle warmth, like a balloon still swelling in silence. And in that silence, there is a very light feeling that everything is unfolding in its own rhythm, a rhythm slow enough for us to release, deep enough for us to rest. And then, as those images gradually fade into stillness, we may return to the rhythm of the breath, to the feeling of the body being supported, to the quiet of the night surrounding us. Out there, the universe is still expanding, very slowly, very steadily, like a long breath that never ends. And in this moment, we too are drifting with that breath, gently, with nowhere to go, nothing to do, only to be here, and to let the quiet continue to spread, like the distances between the stars slowly widening, little by little, in the gentle darkness of endless space. philosophical reflections. And as those familiar images gradually fade into stillness, as the thought of rising dough or slowly expanding balloon becomes softer and more distant, the mind may remain in a quieter space still. A space that no longer needs clear images, where only the gentle sense of being present remains. In that quietness, sometimes a very simple thought appears, like a small point of light in the night sky, that human beings, though we have looked upward for thousands of years, have touched only a very small part of that vast story. It is not because human beings have not tried. On the contrary, the patience of those who have spent their lives observing the sky is something very beautiful. They have watched, recorded, listened to faint signals arriving from distances beyond imagining. Yet the universe is so wide, so deep, and so slow that any understanding is like a small lamp lit in a very large room. The light of that lamp is enough to see what is near, enough to recognize the shapes of a few things around us. But farther away, there is still a gentle darkness, not a frightening darkness, but a wide openness where the unknown continues to exist in silence. And perhaps this does not need to trouble us. There are stories that do not need to be told in a single night. There are mysteries that do not need to be answered at once. They may remain there, quiet like stars that have not yet risen above the horizon, waiting for another time, or perhaps never appearing before our eyes at all. When we think of this, we may feel a small sense of ease, that we do not need to know everything in order to be at peace. We do not need to understand the whole universe in order to lie beneath the night sky and feel its stillness. Human beings, in a way, always stand at the edge of the unknown. And at that edge, curiosity and humility exist together, like two alternating breaths. One breath carries us forward, and the other reminds us that what lies ahead is still very far, very wide, and very deep. The universe does not hurry to reveal everything. It is like a very thick book in which only a few pages are open before us, while many others remain closed, not because they are hidden, but because the time required to read them is longer than a human lifetime. And perhaps this is what makes the story of the universe so gentle. It does not demand that we keep pace with it. It does not require that we understand it completely. It unfolds little by little, slowly, like morning light gradually spreading across the ground, with no clear boundary between night and day. As this thought passes, we may realize that the unknown is not an empty or frightening place. It is like the silence between two notes of music. Without that silence, the music would lose its softness. What human beings do not yet understand about the universe is perhaps far greater than what we do understand. Yet this does not make the sky feel distant. Instead, it makes the sky feel deeper, like an ocean in which we know there are many layers below, quiet, cold, and beautiful in their own way. And as we lie still and listen, we too are within that ocean in a very gentle way. The Earth drifts around the sun drifts within the galaxy, and the galaxy drifts within an even greater expanse of space. All of these movements happen without being noticed in each moment, just as the heart continues to beat without our needing to attend to it. Perhaps the most beautiful thing is not that human beings will one day understand everything, but that we continue to listen, continue to look upward, continue to place very small questions into a very large sky. And those questions do not need answers at once. They may drift through the mind, light as clouds, and then dissolve, leaving behind a quiet space where no thought needs to be held. In that space, there is a very gentle feeling that the universe is still there, vast, slow, and peaceful, regardless of how much we understand of it. And in the same way, peace does not come from knowing everything, but from allowing ourselves to rest within the unknown. As when we close our eyes and do not need to see the room, yet still know that we are in a safe place. Out there, light continues to travel across endless distances. Galaxies continue to drift farther apart. And perhaps somewhere in that vastness, there are things human beings have never imagined, forms of light never seen, stories never told. But none of those things need to arrive tonight. Tonight only needs to be quiet enough, slow enough, gentle enough for the mind to release, for the last thoughts to settle. Like the final ripples on a lake after the wind has fallen still. And in that stillness, we may simply be here, without needing to understand more, without needing to go farther. Only to breathe very slowly, very evenly, and allow the vastness of the universe to become a quiet refuge where every question can sleep, and where sleep itself may come gently, like the soft darkness closing around a sky filled with stars. Calm closing. And as those final thoughts gradually dissolve into stillness, as every question becomes light, like clouds drifting slowly across the night sky, we may allow the mind to rest for a while, without needing to go any farther, without needing to search for anything more. Throughout this journey, we have drifted through vast images, deep expanses, stars and galaxies, quietly moving away from one another in the slow rhythm of the universe. We have passed through stories of light that takes billions of years to reach a single, small point in space, of invisible things that remain silently present, and a future so distant that every change becomes gentle, patient, and calm. Yet all of these things, when we look back, are like very small waves upon a still ocean. What remains, when every image has faded, is only a very simple feeling that the universe is wider, slower, and more peaceful than we often imagine. And in this moment, you are also within that peace. There's nothing more you need to do, nothing you need to remember, only to feel the breath moving in and then moving out, a little slower, a little steadier, as if time itself were softening around you. Somewhere very far away, galaxies may still be drifting, stars still shining, and lights still beginning journeys whose endings are unknown. But all of those movements unfold in profound silence, a silence that is not cold, but gentle, like the darkness of a room after we have grown accustomed to it. And within that same silence, the body may begin to feel a little heavier, a little warmer, as if the small tensions of the day are dissolving, like mist fading in the morning sun. Only slower, softer, and without anyone noticing the exact moment when it disappears. If a thought still passes through the mind, you may let it drift away without holding on to it. Thoughts are like clouds. They come and they go, and the sky behind them is always there, wide and quiet. Out there, the universe continues its long story without needing to be witnessed, without needing to be remembered. And in this moment, you do not need to witness or remember anything more, only to rest. Let your eyes, if they are still open, close gently, like a door settling shut in a very soft breeze. Let the rhythm of your breathing become the only thing that remains in your awareness, slow and steady, like waves touching the shore on a moonless night. And if there is still a sound lingering, perhaps soft music fading in the background, let each note dissolve into the distance, like the last light lingering on the horizon before night becomes completely still. That sound does not need to be followed, only allowed to fade, becoming softer, more distant, until only deep quiet remains. In that quiet, sleep often arrives without being invited. It comes like a mist, very light, very slow, settling over the last thoughts, making everything softer, farther away, more peaceful. And if you can still hear these words, let them drift by like a very gentle stream. No need to follow them, no need to understand, only to allow them to become part of the stillness spreading around you. Tonight, there's nothing that needs to be completed, no question that needs to be answered, only rest and quiet, and the very gentle feeling of being supported like a leaf floating on calm water, with nowhere to go, no need to hurry. I wish you a sleep that is deep, soft, and peaceful. And as the sound fades, as the silence widens, allow your mind to drift a little farther, slowly, gently, until everything dissolves into the soft stillness of the night.